Friday night was supposed to be quiet on Carter Street. The hair braiders packed up their stools. The corner store locked the metal gate. Music from the church down the block drifted through open windows, soft drums, low voices, a prayer that sounded like home to everyone who had crossed the ocean and to everyone who had never left Atlanta. Inside apartment 2B, the clock struck 9. Darius tightened his jaw and rolled up the sleeves of his black dress shirt. He stood over the woman in the wheelchair, a thin leather strap hanging from his hand. The lamp threw a yellow circle across the rug, across her legs, across the quiet determination in her eyes. Her name was Keisha. She used to dance. Now her left foot didn't always listen. Her right hand shook when she was tired. The accident took many things, but not her memory, not her courage, and not her promise to herself, never again. His phone lay face up on the table. A voice was waiting on speaker, smooth as silk and cold as ice. "Put me closer," the voice said. "I want to hear it." Sorry. The woman who wore gold hoops and a diamond nose stud. The woman who had slipped into Darius's life with a bright smile and a sharp plan. The woman who said she could make Darius a boss if he proved he could control his house. Every Friday night, Zuri called. Every Friday night, Darius answered. Every Friday night, Keisha braced herself. He slid the phone nearer. The strap touched his palm. He lifted his arm. Keisha lifted her chin. "Not tonight," she said. Zuri laughed on the phone. "She thinks she gets a vote?" Something changed in the room then, something too small for Darius to see and too big for him to survive. Keisha pressed her thumb against the tiny fob hidden in her robe sleeve. The smoke detector down the hall chirped once. A camera no bigger than a bean blinked awake behind the curtain rod. A second lens tucked inside a bookshelf blinked too. The TV, resting on mute, lit up with a quiet blue icon, live. On the far side of the building, 3 phones buzzed in 3 different hands. In Auntie Folake's kitchen, where jollof simmered, where she minded other people's children and everybody's secrets, her nephew Malik saw the alert first. Carter Street Watch, emergency broadcast, 2B. At the church, Pastor Ruth's tablet flashed the same words. In the corner store, Mr. Ade paused mid-count of the day's cash. Keisha's eyes met Darius's. She did not blink. "Do you hear me?" Zuri's voice purred, louder now on speaker. "Make her cry." Darius lifted the strap higher. The hallway filled with footsteps. A fist pounded the door. A woman's voice called, steady and firm. "Keisha? It's Ruth. Are you safe?" Another knock, harder. A male voice this time, official, urgent, Atlanta PD. "Open up." Darius froze, the strap forming a dark line across the air between his hand and Keisha's shoulder. The phone crackled. "Don't open," Zuri hissed as if she had stepped into the room herself. "If you open, everything's over." Keisha's thumb pressed the fob again. The lamp flickered. The TV volume rose from 0 to a soft hum. On the screen, the camera feed multiplied. One angle from the curtain rod, one from the bookshelf, one from the peephole camera Malik had installed last week when Keisha finally told someone the truth about Fridays. "Now," Keisha whispered, not to Darius, not to Zuri, but to the plan she had built piece by piece with patient hands. The strap trembled in Darius's grip. He looked at the door handle. He looked at the TV. He looked at the woman who used to dance. The pounding on the door did not stop. And then the knob turned from the outside. Before the bolt slid free, before the door opened, before the strap fell or landed, the story spun backward, weeks, months, to the first hint of a Friday night that would change everything. It started in late spring, when the azaleas were loud and the air felt like warm water. Keisha moved into apartment 2B in a building filled with laughter and late-night rice cookers and music that traded Yoruba drums with Sunday choirs. She came from Decatur by way of 1,000 rehearsals, gospel concerts, wedding shows, little local videos where her feet could turn time into light. The accident took her legs from the stage. A driver ran a red light on Lee Street and the world split. She learned metal and pain, stairs and elevators, how to make a small apartment move like a big one. She learned patience because she had no choice and prayer because she wanted to. Darius came with her. Back then he spoke softly and worked hard. He wore cologne like girls wore bracelets. He dreamed about a barbershop of his own. People liked him. People wanted him to do well. The first weeks after the accident, he pushed the chair without being asked. He showed up with dinner from the Nigerian place on Peter Street. He made jokes until her laugh came back. Then Zuri started appearing at the edge of things, like a shadow that knew how to smile. She ran a lounge on the west side where the DJ was good and the sweet pepper wings made people text their cousins. She had friends in places where licenses get approved, where money finds a lane, where a young man with charm and hunger could get ahead, if he didn't look soft. Zuri only had to say that word once. Soft. By the time summer reached its hottest week, Darius stopped laughing as much. He stopped coming home early. He started saying things like, "I'm not your nurse." He started leaving a strap on top of the bookcase. Friday nights grew heavy, like a storm that kept promising rain. Zuri's calls came on schedule. Her voice flowed through the phone like honey poured over glass. "Tell her she belongs to you," she would say. "Don't let her talk back," she would say. "Prove you're not soft," she would say, and then she would listen, and sometimes when Keisha's breath hitched, when she swallowed tears, Zuri would exhale like someone pleased with a song. Neighbors heard thumps. They heard voices raised and lowered. They saw Darius on the stairs, eyes bright and jaw tight. They saw Keisha smile in the daylight in her wheelchair, rolling to Auntie Folake's to buy peppers or to the church to fold flyers. They did not know where to put what they saw beside what they thought they heard. Nobody wanted to be wrong about a home. Everybody wanted to mind their business in peace. Keisha learned to watch Darius's shoulders. She learned the way his fingers twitched just before he reached for the strap. She learned the angle of his head that meant the voice on the phone had gotten inside him again. She learned that silence could be a bigger shield than words. But she was not born to live small. She had danced, and dancing taught her timing. One Wednesday afternoon, the elevator broke, as it did often in a building that had seen too many summers. Malik, who fixed phones and laptops for half the neighborhood, carried her groceries up the stairs without being asked. He set the bags on the kitchen table and noticed the tiny lens box in her trash, the kind people put in doorbells. "You using this?" he asked, a little too casual. Keisha watched him carefully, the way a person watches a bridge before crossing it. Then she took a breath and told the truth. Not all of it at once, but enough. Malik did what young men do when someone's mother or sister or aunt calls them son with their eyes. He brought cables and tiny black squares. He brought an app that looked like a weather forecast but was really a window. He brought Pastor Ruth into it and Auntie Folake. He told them carefully, respectfully, without drama. He told them because he trusted them and because Keisha asked. "Friday nights," Keisha said, "have become a test I never signed up for." "Then let's grade different," Pastor Ruth said. They did not rush. People who fix big things in small apartments rarely rush. They checked laws. They asked the legal aid clinic on Joseph E. Lowry Boulevard what to record and how to save it. They learned about temporary protective orders. They learned about protective orders becoming permanent. They learned which neighbors would stand still and which would look away. They learned the names of 2 officers who took domestic cases seriously. They learned the schedule of the church live stream and how to borrow a screen when the time came. They called it Plan Friday, not because they were clever but because there was no time to be fancy. The plan was simple. Cameras would wake. The church would be ready. The officers would be close. The building's group chat would light up. Keisha would ask for help without looking weak. Darius would be forced to face daylight. What none of them planned for was Zuri. On Thursday night, Zuri texted Darius a photo of a lease document with a blank line where a signature should go. At the bottom, "The Palm Room, co-owner." She wrote, "Tomorrow. Don't disappoint me." Friday came like the others, quiet until it wasn't. Darius showered. He shaved. He put on the black shirt that made him feel like a winner. He set the strap on the table as if it were a key to a future only he could see. 9 o'clock arrived. The church song floated in. Zuri's call came through. Keisha's thumb pressed the fob. Now, in the warm yellow light of apartment 2B, with the camera eyes open and the TV glowing, with Pastor Ruth and Auntie Folake and Mr. Ade watching on their screens and 2 officers at the door, with Zuri's voice curling through the speaker like smoke, the plan finally stood up. The bolt on the door slid. Darius's arm hung in the air, the strap dark against the light. Zuri whispered, "Don't move." Keisha looked at the camera, not the strap, not the man, not the door. She looked at the camera and let the whole building see her face, steady and strong. The door swung open. And the first person who stepped across the threshold was not a police officer, not Pastor Ruth, not Malik. It was Zuri, gold hoops glinting, diamond nose stud cold as a star, smiling like a woman about to collect a debt. Zuri crossed the threshold like she owned the air. The hallway light traced her silhouette, sleek dress, sharp heels, a long camel coat draped over her shoulders like a crown. Behind her, the 2 officers halted for a beat, startled by the surprise entrance. Pastor Ruth and Auntie Folake were a step farther back, exchanging quick looks that said, "This wasn't in the plan but we won't flinch." Darius lowered the strap an inch but didn't drop it. His eyes slid to Zuri, searching her face for instructions, for praise, for anything that would tell him he was still the man he had promised himself he would be. "Baby," Zuri said, voice silky, "you took your time." Her eyes flicked over Keisha, one fast sweep that lingered for a second on the wheelchair and another on the steady gaze on Keisha's face. Zuri's smile thinned, then brightened again as if she had confirmed a rumor she already believed. "You called the whole block," she said to Keisha, the warmth in her voice cooling to something like frost. "Smart. Messy but smart." Keisha held her stare. "I called witnesses." The officer stepped into view now, badges out. Officer Collins, a black woman with calm eyes and a braided bun, spoke first. "We received an emergency broadcast and multiple calls. Everyone, hands where I can see them." Darius let the strap clatter onto the table. The sound was too loud for such a small piece of leather. He shoved his hands into the air, trying to look compliant and casual in one gesture. Zuri, unbothered, lifted both palms at waist level, a picture of elegance even under fluorescent light. "Sir," Officer Collins said to Darius, "step away from your wife." Zuri's lashes fluttered. "Wife? That's adorable." Pastor Ruth moved to Keisha's side, placing 2 fingers on her shoulder, a touch that said, "I'm here." Auntie Folake stood by the door, phone held tight, her thumb hovering over a big red record button she did not actually need because everything was already live. On the TV, the split screens showed the room from 3 angles. On the middle pane, Keisha's face was centered, calm, alert, unbroken. The group chat in the building's app chimed and chimed. Neighbors checking in, sharing screenshots, promising to stay by their doors. Mr. B.R.T typed, "If police need anything from store footage, I have cameras outside." Malik typed, "Pastor, signal if you need me upstairs." Officer Collins nodded toward the table. "Ma'am," she said to Keisha, "are you safe right now?" Keisha inhaled once and let it out slow. "Right now, yes." Her voice carried more truth than volume. The officer gave a small nod that said she believed her. Officer Torres, a Latino officer with a notebook already open, gestured at the strap. "What is that?" Darius forced a laugh. "A belt? I mean, come on." "Not a belt," Auntie Folake snapped, accent thickening with anger. "A kiboko American style. That thing bites." Zuri's smile returned, brighter like a stage light. "Let's not be dramatic. If we're filming, then show the whole scene." He never touched her tonight. Nobody moved. That word, tonight, hung in the air like a stray thread. Officer Collins glanced at the TV. "Do you have prior footage? Dates? Times?" Keisha nodded. "Saved to the cloud. With timestamps. And the medical records. And the report from last month." Torres looked up. "There's a prior report?" Pastor Ruth, already pulling a folder from her tote bag, offered it forward. "This includes copies of doctor notes, photos of bruising, and a clinic social worker's statement." Keisha was seeking a protective order. "We were preparing to file Monday." Zuri's eyes narrowed. For the first time her poise slipped. She turned to Darius, her voice a whisper only he was meant to hear but everyone did. "You told me she was exaggerating. You said it was nothing." Darius swallowed. He looked small suddenly, not younger, not older, just small. A boy in a man's shirt. "Look," he started, voice wobbling, "it's not like." "Don't finish that sentence," Officer Collins said, firm but not unkind. "This is the moment you stop talking and start listening." Keisha's hands rested on the wheels of her chair, fingers steady. She tracked Zuri now, not Darius. "Why are you here?" Zuri met her gaze head-on. "Because he's one signature away from owning his future, and your little show just threatened to ruin it." She tilted her head at the officers. "No offense." Officer Torres scribbled. "What future is that?" "The palm room," Darius blurted, like a child offering the right answer in class. "My barbershop next door. The lounge in back. My steak. We were about to sign. Tonight." "So you came to celebrate," Auntie Folake said dryly, with a strap and a phone call to the mistress. Zuri's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone." "Or what?" Pastor Ruth said, gentle as a knife. "You'll teach us manners?" Keisha's lips curved, barely. A smile that wasn't about joy. It was about recognition. She had seen Zuri's type before backstage and in boardrooms. Women who curated power like it was an art. It was not their ambition that harmed. It was the way they fed that ambition with other people's bruises. Officer Collins gestured toward the hallway. "Let's step outside to de-escalate." "Wait," Keisha said. Everyone paused. Keisha turned to the TV using the remote on her lap. With 2 clicks, she pulled up an older recording. The room dimmed slightly, the way rooms do when a screen becomes the loudest light. On the video, last Friday's scene played. Darius's shoulders. The strap. Keisha's silence. Zuri's voice on speaker saying, "Good. That's how a man keeps a home." Zuri inhaled sharply. "That's not me." "It is." Malik's text popped up on screen from the chat to Keisha, already projected through the app to the TV. "I ran the number through Truecaller last week. It's the same line. I also scrubbed the audio, voice matches clean." Officer Torres nodded, making another note. "Ma'am," he addressed Zuri, "state your full name." She hesitated for the first time. "Zuri Ogunlai." Pastor Ruth made a tiny sound at the surname. Nigerian like many in the building. Community can be a blessing and a mirror. Colin's radio crackled. She listened, then spoke into her shoulder mic. "Copy." To the room she said, "We have enough to proceed with a domestic violence investigation and to assist Ms. Keisha in filing an emergency protective order tonight." Darius's face crumpled. "Tonight? With what? Over a misunderstanding?" Zuri exhaled through her nose, slow and angry. "You told me she was ungrateful. You told me she made you look weak. You didn't tell me there was a file. You told me to prove I could control my house," he said, voice hoarse. "And you believed me." Zuri glanced at Keisha. "But this is your masterpiece. Cameras, church, cops, the whole street. If you wanted him, you could have kept him. You wanted an audience." Keisha's voice was soft. "I wanted protection." For a long second, nobody spoke. The hum of the building rose into the silence. The elevator coughing to life 3 floors down, water pipes whispering, a baby fussing in 3C, the street beat of a passing car. Everyday life threaded through the heat of the moment, reminding everyone that drama ends, but neighbors remain. Officer Collins crouched slightly so her eyes were level with Keisha's. "Do you want us to remove him tonight?" Keisha looked at Darius. She saw not the man with the strap but the man who once learned her favorite dance steps so he could clap on the beat at her shows. Love did not excuse harm. Memory did not erase bruises. Still, she let herself mourn the person she had hoped for as she answered. "Yes," she said. "I want him to go." Darius took a step back as if the floor had moved. "Keisha. Don't say my name like you still own it," she said. Officer Torres moved toward Darius. "Sir, get your keys and ID. You can collect essential items under escort. You'll receive notice about the protective order." Zuri turned toward the door, coat swishing. "We're leaving." Collins blocked her with one arm. "You're free to go, but we may have questions later." Zuri's eyes flashed. "You'll need an appointment. Or a warrant," Torres said, not looking up. Zuri gave Keisha one last glance, calculating, not cruel. "You won tonight," she said. "But do you know what doors close when you make a man look small on camera? Do you know how business moves in this city? Do you know how church moves in this building?" Andy Folake shot back. "We feed people. We walk them to court. We hire lawyers. You're not the only one with friends." Zuri's smile returned, different now, tight, thoughtful. She stepped aside as Darius, hands shaking, gathered his wallet and keys. He looked around at the apartment like it had started speaking a new language. He looked at the TV, at the split screens, at the version of himself that could no longer pretend. "Keisha," he said, voice small, "I can fix." "Not tonight," she said. He swallowed. "Maybe I can." Officer Torres touched his elbow. "Let's go." They led Darius into the hallway. The building seemed to inhale. Doors stayed closed, but eyes behind peepholes watched. Feet stilled on stair landings. Somewhere downstairs, a late pot of rice clicked from cook to warm. Zuri followed, pausing in the doorway to look back at Keisha. "Take a victory lap," she murmured. "Just know that wins like this have receipts." When they were gone, the apartment was quiet again. The TV returned to its home screen. Pastor Ruth exhaled first, long and steady, the way people do when the storm clears enough to see the street. "You did it," she said. Keisha's hands trembled at last. Auntie Folake wrapped her in a quick, warm hug, careful of old bruises and new strength. Malik slipped in from the hall, eyes bright with worry that softened to relief when Keisha nodded once. "I'm okay." Officer Collins remained by the door, listening to her radio. Then she looked up. "We'll file the emergency order tonight. We'll assign a patrol pass on this block for the next week. Keep your devices on. Don't open the door to anyone you don't trust. And be ready." "Ready for what?" Malik asked. Collins hesitated, choosing words. "When men like Darius are pulled out of their orbit, they sometimes swing. When women like Zuri lose control of a story, they sometimes rewrite it." Pastor Ruth's phone vibrated. She glanced down and frowned. "What is it?" Andy Folake asked. Ruth's eyes lifted, troubled. The Palm Room's page just posted. A flyer for tomorrow night. New management. A grand reopening celebration. Special guest announcement at midnight. Keisha felt the floor tilt again, not from fear but from something colder, sharper. Zuri had stepped into their home and walked away untouched. Now she was inviting the city to watch whatever came next. Officer Collins tapped her pen. We'll get the order in. But keep your circle tight. If anything feels off, call us. Keisha nodded. She rolled to the window and pushed the curtain aside with 2 fingers. The street lights made Carter Street look like a stage after the actors have left. Only the set remained. She watched Zuri's camel coat flare as she reached the sidewalk. Zuri did not look up. She slid into the back of a sleek car, glanced at her phone, and smiled at a message nobody in Tubi could see. Keisha let the curtain fall. Tomorrow, Pastor Ruth said gently, we rest. Then we plan. Keisha looked at the empty space where Darius's strap had been, at the bruise of its memory on the wood. No, she said softly. Tomorrow we move. In the hallway, a footstep stopped outside their door. A slip of paper slid under it, silent, pale, edged in gold. Keisha picked it up. On the card, embossed letters gleamed. The Palm Room, midnight. An apology. A surprise. A crown. She turned the card over. A hand-inked note in tight, elegant script read, Bring the cameras. Keisha's thumb hovered over the fob on her sleeve out of habit, then eased away. The church song from down the block rose again, a thin line of hope woven through the night. Looks like the next Friday came early, Auntie Folake whispered. Keisha set the card on the table between the remote and the folder of evidence. Her eyes were steady again. Then we'll be ready, she said, and in the small hush that followed, the building seemed to lean in as if the walls themselves wanted to hear what she would do next. Saturday night came wrapped in the kind of stillness that usually meant trouble was rehearsing. The Palm Room, newly rebranded and reborn under Zuri's rule, glittered from a block away. Blue neon buzzed against the black Atlanta sky, and a red carpet ran from the curb to the glass doors. Cameras flashed as if celebrities were expected, and inside, every inch of space smelled of money, perfume, and danger. Keisha rolled to a stop at the corner opposite the lounge, her cousin Malik pushing her chair with care. Pastor Ruth and Auntie Folake flanked them, each dressed sharply but plainly, blending into the Saturday night crowd that came to watch other people's lives burn bright. Officer Collins had promised a quiet patrol nearby, unseen but close. Keisha wore a fitted black jumpsuit with gold trim and a small microphone pinned to the lapel. Her braids were pulled into a high bun, her makeup clean and powerful. She looked nothing like a victim. She looked like a reckoning. Are you sure about this? Malik whispered, eyes darting across the street. Yes, Keisha said. If she wants cameras, we'll bring cameras. And Darius? Auntie Folake asked. Keisha's gaze didn't waver. If he shows up, he'll see the woman he lost. Not the one he tried to break. The music pulsed through the street, Afrobeats blending with trap rhythms, voices laughing too loud, champagne corks snapping like small fireworks. Zuri knew how to throw a show. Inside, mirrors lined the walls, catching every flicker of light. The DJ booth gleamed like a spaceship. At the center of it all stood Zuri herself, gold dress hugging her curves, her smile wide, her eyes cool and watchful. When Keisha entered, the room didn't quiet immediately. People were too busy posing, dancing, ordering drinks. But Zuri saw her. And that was enough. A ripple moved through the air like someone had whispered an old secret. Zuri's lips curved. Well, she said into the mic, look who decided to RSVP. The crowd turned. Keisha's wheelchair glided between clusters of guests, Malik keeping a hand on the handle but letting her lead the pace. Cameras lifted, phones, vlogs, influencers sniffing drama. Zuri extended a manicured hand. Keisha, darling. I wasn't sure you'd come. Keisha didn't take it. You invited me to my own story. Laughter rippled across the room, nervous, excited, unsure. People could feel the temperature shifting. Zuri gestured to the bar. Let's toast then. To survival, to success, to letting go. Funny, Keisha said. That's what my therapist said the night before I pressed record. That line hit like a drum. Zuri blinked, caught off guard but recovered with a slow grin. Always a performer. I learned from the best, Keisha said. You love an audience. Zuri took a sip of champagne. What do you want, really? A confession? An apology? You got him arrested. You embarrassed me. You won. Keisha leaned forward slightly. No, Zuri. I started. The lights dimmed. Everyone turned toward the large screen behind the DJ booth. The music cut. And suddenly, the same footage that had streamed to the building the night before filled the screen. Darius's arm raised, Zuri's voice on speaker, the strap falling, Keisha's calm defiance. The crowd gasped, phones shot up, someone shouted, "Lord have mercy," while another whispered, "That's her?" Zuri's jaw clenched. "Turn that off." The DJ hesitated, caught between loyalty and fear. "Boss, I said turn it." Too late. The video froze on the frame where Zuri's voice said, "That's how a man keeps a home." Keisha spoke into the mic someone had handed her. Her voice steady, soft, cutting through the stunned silence. "That was the woman who said she'd make him rich. That was the woman who taught him to hit me to prove he wasn't soft. That was the woman who said pain was power. But she forgot, pain doesn't disappear. It transforms." Zuri stepped forward, fury flickering behind her smile. "You think this proves anything? It's out of context." "Then let's add context," Keisha said. Malik, who had been live-streaming the event quietly from his phone, turned the camera toward Zuri. "Context," he said, "is when a woman thinks she can hide behind business and pride while destroying another woman's body and home." Someone in the crowd shouted, "She's been abusing her." Another yelled, "That's wicked." Voices rose. Phones streamed. The internet was already watching. Zuri's poise cracked. "You're making a mistake, Keisha. You think the city cares about your sob story? They'll forget you tomorrow. I'll still own this place." Keisha's lips curved into a small smile. "You won't." "Excuse me?" Keisha turned her chair slightly, facing the entrance. At that exact moment, Officer Collins entered, flanked by two plainclothes detectives. "Miss Ogunlai?" Collins said. "You're under arrest for coercion, accessory to assault, and obstruction of justice." Gasp. Phones trembled in hands. Zuri's smile shattered. "This is ridiculous." "It's justice," Keisha said quietly. Collins held up a warrant. "Signed an hour ago. We have the recordings, the texts, and the financial transactions linking you to Darius Carter. You'll have your day in court." Zuri looked around for allies, but the crowd had already shifted, people backing away from her like she carried a contagious truth. The DJ cut the mic feed entirely. She whispered, "You'll regret this." Keisha's reply was almost gentle. "You already do." The officers cuffed Zuri, leading her past cameras and open mouths. Outside, red and blue lights flashed against the glass windows, painting the street in color. When the doors closed behind them, a thick silence settled. Then Malik raised his phone. "For everyone watching," he said, "this is what happens when silence ends." Cheers erupted, not wild, not cruel, but full of release. People clapped, whistled, prayed aloud. Pastor Ruth walked over to Keisha, tears in her eyes. "You did it, child." Keisha exhaled. "Not yet." Andy Folake frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's gone." Keisha's gaze drifted to the side door, where Darius stood. He wasn't cuffed. Not yet. He looked thinner, eyes hollow, beard unshaven. He held something small in his hand, a folded paper. He walked slowly toward her through the dispersing crowd. "Keisha," he said quietly, "I didn't know she was setting me up. I swear. I lost everything. The shop, my friends, my life. I thought I could make it right tonight." "What's that in your hand?" Malik asked, stepping forward protectively. Darius unfolded the paper. "A deed. It's yours. The palm room. She made me sign it over to her weeks ago. But she never registered it. I'm giving it to you. Sell it, keep it, burn it. I don't care." Keisha looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I remember the woman who danced," he said, voice cracking. "And I want her to live again. Even if I'm not in that life." Auntie Folake's eyes softened, but Malik didn't trust him. "You think a signature erases bruises?" Darius shook his head. "No. Nothing erases them. But maybe it balances something." He placed the deed on the table beside Keisha's chair, turned, and walked out quietly as the officers outside nodded him away. Pastor Ruth leaned close to Keisha. "Now it's over." Keisha shook her head slightly. "No. It's changing. That's different." Outside, reporters were already gathering, asking neighbors about the woman in the wheelchair who brought down the lounge owner. The night sky hummed with sirens and chatter. Keisha looked at Malik. "Post everything," she said. "Every file, every message, every recording. Let it teach somebody." Malik nodded, fingers flying across his screen. As the noise outside swelled again, Keisha's phone buzzed. A message. No number. Just words. "This isn't finished. Z. Keisha read it twice. Then she smiled faintly and whispered, "Good. Neither am I." She rolled toward the exit, the crowd parting, the neon lights tracing a halo around her as she crossed the threshold. Behind her, the palm room sign flickered, blue to red, then out completely. And in the silence that followed, the world realized the story wasn't over. It had just changed hands. Sunday morning rolled in with the soft hum of city buses and gospel music leaking from open windows. But inside apartment 2B, the quiet wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Keisha sat by the window, sunlight washing over her brown skin like forgiveness she hadn't asked for. Her wheelchair faced Carter Street, where curious neighbors passed by in twos and threes, talking about what happened at the palm room. Her name was on everyone's lips. Some called her brave, some pitied her, some whispered she'd gone too far. But Keisha didn't care what label they used. She was done living for other people's definitions. Auntie Folake stirred a pot of pepper soup in the kitchen, muttering prayers between each stir. "And God of justice," she said under her breath, "you do not sleep. When you rise, enemies scatter." Pastor Ruth sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. "You've gone viral, my dear," she said softly. "There's a hashtag justice for Keisha. Over 100,000 shares since last night." Malik, half smiling, half exhausted, slouched on the couch with his laptop. "You're trending on every platform. News stations already called. They want to interview you. CNN, Al Jazeera, Channels TV, all of them." Keisha didn't look away from the window. "I don't want interviews. I want safety." "Safety and justice aren't the same," Malik said. "You can get both if you speak." "I've already spoken," she murmured. "Now the world needs to listen." Just then, a knock echoed through the apartment, 3 sharp taps. Everyone froze. Folake lowered her spoon, eyes darting toward the door. "Who is that?" "Not at this hour." Malik moved first, glancing through the peephole. He relaxed slightly. "It's Officer Collins." The officer stepped in, plainclothes now, carrying a folder. "Morning, everyone," she said. Her tone was serious but not grim. "I wish this visit was routine." "It's not." Keisha gestured for her to sit. "What's wrong?" Collins laid the folder on the table and flipped it open. Inside were printed photos. Zuri being led into the precinct, Darius signing paperwork, court forms stamped filed. Then, at the bottom, a new document, typed but unsigned. "It's a statement Zuri gave to the press from custody last night," Collins said. "She claims you, Keisha, set her up to blackmail her. She's telling them you used the footage for clout. She's spinning the story as a publicity stunt." Auntie Folake clapped her hands in disbelief. "You." "The lioness still roars even with her teeth broken." Pastor Ruth frowned. "And people are believing her?" Collins nodded. "Some are. She's rich, connected, and charismatic. The kind of person who always lands on her feet. But we're building a strong case. The evidence you collected will hold in court." Keisha's expression didn't change. "She's not afraid of the law. She's afraid of losing control." Collins leaned forward. "That's why you need to stay alert. Until the hearing, avoid public appearances and online arguments. We'll keep a car nearby." Malik shut his laptop. "We'll take shifts. Someone will always be with her." Folake crossed herself. "Ah, this girl. Even in trouble, you still bring community together." Keisha smiled faintly. "It's not trouble. It's purpose." For a moment, the room softened, hopeful, almost light. But the reprieve broke when a phone began to ring. Not any of theirs. A deep tone from the hallway. Malik stepped out and returned holding a small package left at the door, a white box tied with a golden ribbon, no sender's name. Folake hissed softly. "Don't open it." Officer Collins stood up immediately. "Step back." She lifted the lid carefully, one hand hovering over her holster just in case. Inside wasn't a threat, it was a single flash drive resting on a folded note. The note read in looping handwriting. "You think you ended me. But I left one last show. Play it. Z." Collins frowned. "We'll analyze this at the station." But Keisha shook her head. "No. We play it here. Now." "Keisha. If she's sending a message, I want to hear it before she controls the narrative again." Malik inserted the flash drive into his laptop. The screen blinked and a video loaded. A dimly lit room, Zuri sitting at a vanity mirror in her golden dress from last night. Her makeup was perfect, her expression unreadable. "Hello world," Zuri said, her voice smooth calm. "Since everyone seems fascinated by my downfall, I thought I'd offer a final statement." She looked directly into the camera. Keisha Carter is not a victim. She's a strategist. The same woman who claimed I coerced her husband was already negotiating a deal to sell her story before the police ever showed up. She knew exactly when to press record, when to cry, when to smile. She's the best actress I've ever seen. Malik swore under his breath. She's trying to rewrite it. Zuri continued. And since people love evidence so much, I brought some. She reached into a drawer, pulled out a printed contract and held it up to the camera. A media offer. Signed with her name. Check the date, 2 days before the so-called assault. The video paused. Malik zoomed in on the document. The signature looked eerily real, Keisha's name in cursive, identical to her handwriting. That's not possible, Keisha whispered. I never signed anything. Collins narrowed her eyes. Forgery. She's framing you. Folek slammed the table. The devil doesn't rest. Pastor Ruth stood, voice low but firm. Then we fight fire with light. If she wants lies to trend, we'll make truth louder. Keisha's jaw tightened. No. I'll handle this myself. Malik looked alarmed. Handle it how? She wants a show? Keisha said, turning toward the window. Then I'll give her one. But this time it'll be on my stage. That evening, Keisha went live. No filters. No glamour. Just her in the same chair, wearing a plain white t-shirt, the golden light of sunset washing her in calm fire. Good evening, she began softly, her voice trembling at first but steadying with every word. Some of you have seen the video. Some of you believe it. That's okay. Because truth doesn't need everyone, it just needs time. She looked straight into the camera. Yes, I recorded my abuse. Yes, I made a plan. Because women like me don't survive by accident. We survive by intention. She paused, letting that sink in. And no, I didn't sell my story. But even if I did, would that make my pain less real? Would it make his hands softer? Her voice kinder? The comments flooded in, thousands pouring hearts, prayers and confessions. Malik, behind the camera, mouthed silently, It's working. Keisha continued. I forgive them, not because they deserve it but because I refuse to carry their poison any longer. If you're watching this and you've ever been told your story makes you weak, remember this. Survival isn't shame. It's strategy. She ended the live quietly. No outro. No music. Just a whispered, thank you for listening. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. Later that night, Collins texted her. The DA just saw your video. They're fast-tracking the hearing. Zuri's stunt backfired. You did good. Keisha smiled faintly, exhaling for what felt like the first time in months. Outside, the streetlights glowed soft and warm. Auntie Folek turned off the stove. Peace tastes like pepper soup, she said with a wink. But as Keisha rolled to her bedroom, her phone buzzed again. A known number. One line. You forgave too early. She froze. It wasn't Zuri's writing this time. It was Darius's. Keisha stared at the message on her phone screen, the glow reflecting off her wide, sleepless eyes. You forgave too early. It was Darius. The man who had once promised her the world, and then made that world small enough to fit between the four corners of her living room. Her first instinct was fear. Then confusion. Then anger, slow, quiet, but alive. She typed a single reply. What do you mean? The 3 dots appeared immediately. He was waiting. Zuri is not done. She's paying people. They'll come for you. I tried to warn you in person but Collins had me pushed away. Please listen. Keisha's heart thudded. Her fingers trembled. How do you know that? She replied. No answer came for a long minute. Then, because she called me from inside the cell. She's using someone else's phone. Keisha locked her screen and dropped the phone onto the table as though it had burned her. From the kitchen, Auntie Folek's soft humming drifted in, an old Yoruba hymn that usually meant everything will be fine. But tonight, the words sounded far away. Malik walked in, rubbing his eyes. You okay? Keisha didn't look up. He texted me. Darius? What did he say? She told him. Every word. Malik's expression darkened like thunder rolling across calm sky. He's playing mind games again. Don't fall for it. What if he's not lying? She asked quietly. Zuri doesn't take losses lightly. You saw how fast she tried to twist the story. Then let her try, Malik said. We'll record her again if we have to. Keisha turned to face him. I'm tired of reacting, Malik. I need to end this before she does. By morning, a plan had begun to form, a plan Keisha didn't share with anyone yet. She spent hours at her desk, scrolling through old messages, screenshots, receipts, and documents from the lounge's ownership papers. Zuri had always been proud, always careless with her pride. Somewhere in that arrogance was a loose thread, and Keisha was ready to pull. Meanwhile, at Fulton County Jail, Zuri sat in a private cell, her back straight, her eyes sharp. Her lawyer, a well-groomed man with silver hair, leaned forward across the small table. "Ms. Ogunlai, the DA has substantial evidence," he said. "Voice recordings, financial ties, eyewitnesses. The judge might deny bail." Zuri smiled slightly. "Judge Ellis won't deny anything I want. He still owes me from the fundraiser last year." The lawyer hesitated. "Still, your public image is exactly what I'll use," Zuri interrupted. "The people who hate me are the same ones who made me trend. All I need is one leak. Something to make the world question that girl's halo." "Keisha Carter?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," Zuri said softly. "She thinks forgiveness protects her. But forgiveness without control is weakness. I'll make her wish she'd stayed silent." She leaned back, eyes glinting. "By the time I'm done, the world will forget what I did. They'll remember what she became." 2 days later, a clip surfaced online. It showed Keisha and Malik sitting together in the Palm Room after Zuri's arrest, laughing, talking. A voice overlaid the footage, edited to sound like Keisha's, saying, "If this goes viral, we're rich." The internet exploded. Comments flooded in. "So she faked it? Another clout chaser. I knew that story was too perfect." By afternoon, Keisha's sponsorship offers vanished, her messages filled with insults, and strangers who once called her brave now called her liar. She sat in the dark, scrolling through the chaos until her vision blurred. Malik tried to speak, but she raised her hand. "Don't," she said. "Just don't." Her phone buzzed again. A known number. "You see how fast they turn on you? You built your fame on my pain. Now let's see if you can live without it." "See?" Keisha's hand shook. "She's framing me again." Malik's jaw tightened. "Then we frame her truth." He grabbed his backpack and pulled out an external drive. "I backed up everything the night of the arrest. All the real footage, the metadata, the timestamps. We'll trace where the fake one came from." They stayed up all night comparing digital fingerprints. Line by line. Frame by frame. At 3:17 a.m., Malik slammed his hand on the table. "Got it?" The video had been uploaded from an IP address registered under the Palm Room LLC, the same business now under temporary ownership by Keisha herself, thanks to Darius's signed transfer. Zuri had used Keisha's own property to destroy her. Keisha laughed bitterly. Poetic. But Malik grinned. Or stupid. Because that means she left a trail. By the next day, they met with Officer Collins again at the precinct. Collins reviewed the data, her expression grim. "This is enough to charge her with cyber harassment, defamation, and tampering. But we'll need her digital signature." "She's in jail," Keisha said. "How can she be uploading anything?" Collins frowned. "Not from inside. But if she's using a proxy, someone outside will find them. You just have to stay quiet online. No responses, no videos." Keisha nodded slowly. "Quiet is fine. I'll make noise when it matters." That night, Keisha visited the Palm Room for the first time since the confrontation. The lounge was locked, dusty, abandoned, its blue neon sign still flickering half dead. Malik stood beside her, flashlight in hand. "You sure you want to go in here?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I need to see where it all started." Inside, the air smelled of stale perfume and burnt wires. Champagne glasses still lined the counter. The mirror wall reflected 2 silhouettes, one standing, one seated, but both equally strong. Keisha rolled forward until she reached the center of the dance floor. "This place tried to bury me," she whispered. "Now I'll make it my testimony." "Your what?" She looked up at the old projection screen where her abuse had once played to the world. "I'm turning this into something new. A safe house. For women like me." Malik's eyes widened. "A shelter?" "Yes," she said firmly. "A space for healing. For freedom. For women who think their stories end in silence." He smiled slowly. "You're something else, Keisha." She nodded. "No. I'm just done surviving. It's time to build." But before they left, Malik's flashlight flickered across the bar, and froze. The cell phone lay under the counter, still on. The wallpaper showed Zuri and Darius smiling together. Malik picked it up carefully. This must be her old phone. Keisha's pulse quickened. "Search it." Inside were dozens of messages, screenshots, voice notes, contacts. But one message, time-stamped after Zuri's arrest, stood out. "Deliver the final phase." Same address. Friday. Midnight. Malik stared at it. Final phase. Keisha's skin prickled. She's planning something. Friday came fast. Carter Street was quiet again, too quiet. The air hung thick and heavy. Officer Collins had promised patrols nearby, but something in Keisha's gut twisted anyway. She sat by the window, phone in hand, waiting for the clock to strike midnight. 11:56. 11:57. 11:58. A dark car turned onto the street and parked outside. Headlights off. Two men stepped out, both in hoodies, faces shadowed. They looked up at the building, then at each other. Keisha's throat tightened. She reached for the fob under her sleeve, her silent alarm. The men approached the door. 11:59. Her thumb pressed down. The siren triggered instantly, loud, shrill, echoing through the entire building. Lights flashed. Neighbors shouted. Doors opened. Within seconds, Malik was at her side, holding his phone. Police are on their way. The men turned to run, but patrol lights cut across the street. They froze as two officers tackled them down. Within minutes, Collins herself arrived, breathing hard, weapon drawn. "Are you okay?" she asked. Keisha nodded shakily. "I'm fine." Collins knelt beside one of the suspects. "You work for Zuri Ogunlai?" The man hesitated. Then, under the weight of her stare, he muttered, "She paid us. Said to burn her old phone and scare the woman in the wheelchair. That's all." Collins stood, fury flashing in her eyes. "She ordered this from jail. That's enough to keep her locked for years." Keisha finally exhaled. "Then it's over." Collins gave a small, hard smile. "It's over when the judge says it is. But you just won the battle she didn't see coming." That night, as peace finally returned to Carter Street, Keisha sat by her window again. Outside, the air smelled of rain and freedom. Inside, her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She whispered to herself, "Every Friday he used to beat me. But now, every Friday I win something new." And somewhere far away in a cold cell, Zuri's phone buzzed with a news alert. Disabled woman turns abuser's lounge into shelter for victims. The Palm Room reborn as haven of hope. Zuri's jaw clenched. Her reflection in the steel mirror stared back, furious and beaten, not by violence but by truth. By the next morning, the Palm Room was no longer just a building, it was a movement. Headlines carried the story across every major network. Disabled wife turns abuser's lounge into safe haven. From pain to power, Keisha Carter's courage inspires a nation. People flooded the comments with love and disbelief. Donations poured in from across America and Africa alike. Mothers, daughters, and survivors began showing up outside the old lounge, leaving flowers, notes, and candles by the door. What was once a place of humiliation now pulsed with rebirth. Keisha sat by the large front window, watching women of every background gather. A young woman from Alabama with bruises fading on her cheek, an older Nigerian mother clutching a rosary, a girl of barely 16 who said in a small voice, "I just want to feel safe." She greeted each one with the same words, "You're not alone anymore." Inside the newly transformed space, Malik worked tirelessly with volunteers, rewiring lights, repainting walls, and setting up new security systems. Pastor Ruth organized a corner for prayer and counseling, while Auntie Folake managed food and community donations like she was born for it. "This place will breathe," Folake said proudly, sweeping her hands. "No more fear. Only healing." But as the laughter of volunteers filled the room, Keisha's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One message. "They'll love you today. But fame fades. And so does pity. See you in court. Z." She exhaled sharply and tucked the phone away. Even behind bars, Zuri's words found her like knives wrapped in perfume. Malik noticed. "She's still reaching you, isn't she?" Keisha nodded. "But I'm done letting her in. The more I rise, the smaller her voice gets." A week later, the courthouse steps were crowded. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted questions. The trial of state versus Zuri Ogunlai and Darius Carter had officially begun. Keisha rolled up the ramp, dressed in a deep navy gown that gave her the quiet power of a queen. Her hair was styled in a neat bun and her eyes, though tired, burned with steady resolve. Inside the courtroom, Zuri sat at the defendant's table in a tailored gray suit, her posture perfect, her smile brittle. Darius sat beside her, hands cuffed, head bowed. He looked older, guilt had carved years into his face. When the judge entered, the room went silent. "Court is now in session for the matter of State of Georgia versus Zuri Ogunlai and Darius Carter," the bailiff announced. The DA stood. "Your Honor, The prosecution will show that Ms. Ogunlai orchestrated a pattern of coercion and manipulation that led directly to the repeated physical abuse of Mrs. Keisha Carter by her husband, Darius Carter. We will also show that she attempted to tamper with evidence and endanger the victim even after her arrest. Zuri's lawyer rose smoothly. Your Honor, my client is the real victim here, a businesswoman caught in the drama of a failing marriage. The so-called evidence was doctored. The videos were staged. Keisha didn't flinch. She'd rehearsed this moment in her mind for months. When it was her turn to take the stand, the courtroom leaned in. Her wheelchair squeaked softly as Malik adjusted the microphone for her. She smiled faintly, not for the cameras but for herself. Mrs. Carter, the DA began, can you tell the court what used to happen every Friday night? Keisha's voice didn't tremble. Every Friday night, my husband came home after a call with his mistress. She'd tell him to prove he was a man. And he'd beat me until I stopped crying. Because that's what she wanted to hear. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Zuri's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. And how did you finally decide to record it? I realized silence was helping them more than it was helping me. So I turned their ritual into their evidence. The DA smiled slightly. And why release the footage publicly? Because the world believes women like me last, until they see what we survive. When Zuri's lawyer cross-examined her, the tension rose. Mrs. Carter, he began coolly, you're aware that your viral fame brought in donations worth over $300,000? Yes. And that you used those funds to reopen the palm room? Yes. So, would you say you profited from your trauma? The courtroom murmured. The question was sharp, meant to twist sympathy into suspicion. But Keisha's reply cut cleaner. No, sir. I didn't profit. I repurposed. Explain that, he said, frowning. I took a place meant for pain and turned it into a place for healing. If that's profit, then every survivor should be rich. Applause broke out from the back benches before the judge banged his gavel for silence. Even the judge's stern eyes softened. When Zuri finally took the stand, she was calm, collected, venom wrapped in velvet. She began with charm, the kind that made people forget who they were listening to. I never told Darius to hit his wife, she said. I told him to be strong. He misunderstood me. The DA's eyes narrowed. So you admit to influencing his actions? I admit to inspiring him, she said with a small smile. Is inspiration a crime? Keisha watched her, amazed that even cornered, Zuri still spun poison like silk. The DA clicked a button. The courtroom monitors flickered to life. Zuri's recorded voice echoed. Good. That's how a man keeps a home. The courtroom went dead silent. Zuri's mask cracked. That audio was manipulated. The DA interrupted. The metadata shows it was recorded directly from your number. And that's not all. He gestured to Officer Collins, who entered holding an envelope. Inside are records of messages you sent to hired men last Friday, instructing them to intimidate the victim. Zuri's lips trembled for the first time. No. The DA raised a brow. You didn't just lose control, Ms. Ogunlai. You weaponized it. By the time the closing arguments were delivered, the jury didn't need convincing. Their verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. Zuri's composure shattered. You can't do this to me, she screamed as guards restrained her. I built everything. I made him. I made her. Darius sat motionless, tears streaking his cheeks. He didn't look at Keisha. He couldn't. The judge's gavel fell. Ms. Ogunlai, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison without parole for aggravated coercion, witness intimidation and conspiracy to commit assault. Mr. Carter, 3 years for domestic abuse and 1 year probation upon release. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and flashes. Keisha closed her eyes as relief rolled through her like wine through open windows. Outside, the crowd awaited her. Cameras. Microphones. Applause. But Keisha didn't stop to speak. She rolled down the steps slowly, hands trembling, eyes glassy. Malik stepped beside her. You won. She looked ahead, the late afternoon sun painting her skin in gold. No, she said softly. We all did. Pastor Ruth met them at the bottom of the stairs with Andy Folake, both holding flowers. You carried our daughters, Ruth said. Now they'll walk because of you. Keisha smiled, the tears finally falling. Then let them run. That night, she returned to the palm room, now glowing with warm lights and the hum of quiet hope. She moved through the hall, touching the walls that once echoed screams, now filled with laughter. Children played in the corner. A woman read aloud from a journal. Soft gospel hummed from a speaker. A new sign hung by the door. The Palm Room, a home for her. Keisha stood beneath it, whispering a prayer. I used to wait for Friday nights to survive, she said. Now I wait for them to heal. Across the city in a cold prison cell, Zuri lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her roommate snored softly. The world outside moved on without her. For the first time in her life, silence didn't mean control, it meant being forgotten. She reached for the small mirror beside her cot, caught her reflection and whispered, she won't stay shining forever. But deep down she knew the truth, Keisha had become untouchable. Because a woman who turns her pain into purpose can't ever be broken again. The following months glowed with rebirth. The Palm Room shelter for women became a symbol far beyond Atlanta. Churches, NGOs, and local governments all reached out. Donations grew into programs. Volunteers became staff. Even news anchors started referring to Keisha as the voice of courage. Yet behind the praise, Keisha carried a quiet unease. She wasn't afraid anymore, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the storm had gone silent too soon. Some nights she still dreamed of Zuri, gold dress, perfect smile, whispering, you think pain stops talking just because you stopped listening? But each morning she rose, rolled to her mirror and whispered back, I'm not listening, I'm building. One bright Friday, Keisha stood in front of the Palm Room's main hall, surrounded by rows of chairs and vibrant African fabrics hanging from the ceiling. Today was the shelter's official grand opening. A brass band from the community played softly while the press waited outside. Pastor Ruth clapped her hands together, beaming. Ah, my daughter. The Lord really turned ashes into beauty. Auntie Folake, now proudly calling herself Mama Palm Room, fussed with the guest seating. Make sure Channel 5 gets front row. They came early. Important people don't like to wait. Malik adjusted the camera tripod. Ready when you are, sis. Keisha smiled warmly at him. You've been my backbone through it all. Thank you. He grinned. Nah, you're the spine. I'm just the vertebrae. She laughed, a sound the whole neighborhood had grown to love. The event began. Keisha took the stage, the sunlight spilling across her face as she spoke. Good evening, everyone, she began, her voice calm but commanding. When I first rolled into this building, it was filled with pain. But today, look around, it's filled with hope. The same walls that once witnessed cruelty will now shelter courage. The same floor that echoed anger will now hear laughter. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. I want to dedicate this place, she continued, to every woman who's ever been told her pain is her fault. To every survivor who was made to feel small. To every voice that was silenced until it screamed. This place is for you. The crowd stood in ovation. Keisha smiled through tears. And for anyone watching this from home, remember your story doesn't end with what broke you. Sometimes that's just where it begins. After the ceremony, guests mingled and hugged, reporters gathered around for interviews, and children played with balloons near the entrance. Keisha slipped into the back office for a moment of quiet. She turned on her laptop to check messages, hundreds of congratulations. But buried between them, one new email caught her eye. No sender. No subject. Just an attachment named, The Palm Room Files. She hesitated. Her pulse slowed. She opened it. The screen filled with a single video, shaky footage recorded inside a prison. Zuri's face appeared, thinner, eyes darker, but her poise still sharp. She sat on her bunk, speaking directly to the camera. Congratulations, Keisha. You took everything. But remember, nothing stays clean forever. The truth always stains. Then her lips curved into that familiar half-smile. You think you're the only one who can build something? Watch closely. The video cut to a different angle. A group of women in orange prison uniforms gathered around Zuri, listening intently as she spoke. We're starting over, Zuri said. A new network. Inside here. When the world forgets us, we'll remind them who built it. One of the inmates whispered, What should we call it? Zuri smiled into the lens. The Iron Palm. The screen went black. Malik walked in just as Keisha froze, staring at the laptop. Hey, you okay? She pointed at the screen. He leaned over, watching the footage play again. When it ended, he frowned deeply. She's organizing in prison? What, like a gang? Not a gang, Keisha murmured. A shadow. What do you mean? Keisha shut the laptop slowly. Zuri's not just surviving prison, she's building her next stage. Malik crossed his arms. Then we shut it down before it starts. She nodded. But this time not through courts. Through awareness. By the next week, Keisha arranged a meeting with Officer Collins and Pastor Ruth. They gathered in the shelter office late at night, reviewing the footage. Collins leaned back, shaking her head. I knew she was manipulative, but this is organized. If she's forming something behind bars, that's a security issue. Pastor Ruth sighed. The devil never retires, my dear. He just changes uniforms. Keisha spoke quietly. We can't fight her with anger. We'll fight her with light. She builds followers? Then we build voices. Collins raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? A documentary, Keisha said firmly. About the truth. About women who use pain to rise, and those who use power to destroy. Collins nodded slowly. You'd be risking reopening old wounds. Keisha smiled sadly. Healing isn't pretending the wound never existed. It's showing the scar and saying, I survived this. Weeks later the filming began. Malik directed. Foley coordinated. Ruth narrated parts of it. Keisha told her story again, not for sympathy this time but as a blueprint. The documentary, titled The Last Friday, premiered online 3 months later. Within days it crossed 1 million views. Survivors from across the world sent messages, thanking her for giving them the courage to speak. But hidden among the supportive comments was one that stood out. No profile picture, no name, just words. We watched your film. We're learning from you. The Iron Palm. That night, Malik found her on the roof of the palm room, staring out over the city lights. You saw it too, didn't you? He asked. Yes, she said softly. She's still watching. He leaned on the railing beside her. Then what do we do? Keisha's lips curved into a calm, knowing smile. We keep building. Because every time she watches me heal, she loses another piece of control. She turned her face toward the moonlight. Let her start her iron palm. I'll build open hands, ones that lift others up instead of holding them down. The wind moved through her hair. Below them, laughter and music rose from the palm room courtyard, women dancing barefoot, free. For the first time in years, Keisha felt the same rhythm she once danced to before everything fell apart. Her body may have changed, but her spirit hadn't. And somewhere deep in that prison, Zuri stared at a tiny smuggled phone screen, watching the video of Keisha's speech from the grand opening. Her expression was unreadable. Not anger. Not envy. Just recognition. Because she finally understood what Keisha had built was something she could never control. Not fame. Not fear. Not power. Freedom. It was 6 months later, and the palm room shelter had grown into a sanctuary of hope and structure. Each room carried stories of women rebuilding their lives, single mothers earning new certifications, teenage girls writing poetry to reclaim their voices, and even a few men who came to volunteer after witnessing abuse in their own homes. What started as one woman's rebellion had become a movement. Yet Keisha's life, as peaceful as it appeared, had changed in quieter, more complicated ways. She was no longer the woman waiting for rescue or revenge. She had become a symbol. And symbols, she was learning, didn't always get to rest. That Friday morning, Keisha sat in her office, reviewing the shelter's financial reports. She smiled at the growth, donations stable, the new Friday healing workshops fully booked for the next 2 months. Then came the knock on the door. Come in, she said. Officer Collins stepped inside, now promoted to Detective Collins. She had swapped her uniform for a dark suit, her expression sharp as ever. Morning, Keisha, Collins said, taking a seat. I wish I came just to congratulate you. But there's something I need you to see. Keisha's brows furrowed. What happened? Collins opened a file and slid it across the table. Inside were several printed stills, grainy security camera footage from inside the prison. In the images, Zuri sat across from a visiting man in a brown jacket and baseball cap. His head was slightly bowed, but the shape of his shoulders, broad and familiar, made Keisha's blood run cold. She leaned forward. No, that's not. It is, Collins said quietly. Darius Carter. Keisha's pulse spiked. He's supposed to be at the halfway house program. He was. Until 3 weeks ago, Collins replied. He's been meeting Zuri secretly during work release hours. We tracked messages between them. She's manipulating him again, or maybe they're planning something together. Keisha sat back slowly. After everything she's done, he still goes to her? Collins nodded grimly. Control doesn't always need love. Sometimes it just needs guilt. Keisha pressed her fingers to her temple. What are they planning? That's what I came to ask you, Collins said. Has anything strange happened lately? Anything missing, any threats? Keisha thought for a moment. Then her gaze drifted to her desk, the fresh bouquet of lilies delivered that morning. No sender, no card. Just flowers. She felt her stomach tighten. Those arrived an hour ago. No one knows who sent them. Collins frowned, pulling on latex gloves. She lifted the bouquet gently, searching the wrapping. A tiny folded note fell to the floor. She opened it carefully. For old time's sake. I learned from your Fridays. Signed only, D. That night the shelter's halls were quiet. Too quiet. Keisha lay awake, her mind running through every possible outcome. Was he angry? Was he jealous? Was Zuri still pulling his strings from behind those concrete walls? Around midnight, the motion lights in the hallway flickered. Malik, who had insisted on staying over to watch the night shift, poked his head through her door. You awake? Yes, she said softly. Can't sleep. He entered, holding 2 mugs of tea. Neither can I. That detective said they'd put surveillance outside the building. Keisha nodded, but her voice was distant. He used to bring me lilies after every argument. He'd say it meant forgiveness. Malik hesitated. You think he's? I think he's repeating old patterns, she said. But this time, I won't be the quiet one. The next morning, Keisha called for a community meeting inside the shelter. All the residents and staff gathered in the main hall, the same place where months ago, the walls still smelled of alcohol and shame. She rolled to the center, her voice calm but strong. I want to remind all of us, she began, that abuse doesn't always end when someone walks away. Sometimes it tries to come back, wearing old gifts, old promises, old flowers. Several women nodded tearfully. Keisha continued, if danger returns, we don't run alone anymore. We rise together. The crowd clapped, murmuring affirmations. Then she looked straight into the camera, because she knew Collins had one installed now, hidden but active. Whoever's watching, she said deliberately, know this, fear doesn't live here anymore. That night, Collins' phone rang. It was one of her tech analysts. Detective, you might want to see this. The suspect, Darius Carter, never went home tonight. His GPS tracker shows he stopped moving at an abandoned lot 2 miles from the prison. Collins grabbed her coat. Stay on him. I'm heading there. Meanwhile, at the shelter, Malik was locking the main doors when the power suddenly cut out. The hum of the fridge, the gentle overhead lights, even the security monitor, all went dark. Keisha? He called, grabbing his flashlight. Her voice echoed from the hall. It's okay. The backup generator should kick in soon. But the generator didn't start. Outside, thunder rolled, low, heavy like the city holding its breath. Then a knock on the glass door. Slow. 2 taps. Pause. 2 more. Malik moved toward it cautiously. A man stood outside, rain running down his face, his hood low. Even through the glass, the outline of his jaw was unmistakable. Darius, Malik whispered. Keisha rolled closer. Don't open it. The man lifted his head, revealing tired eyes. He looked older, haunted. I just want to talk, he said through the glass. Malik positioned himself between Darius and the door. The police will be here any minute. I'm not here to fight, Darius said. Please, Keisha. One last Friday. I just want to say sorry. Lightning flashed across his face, illuminating something clutched in his hand, a small white envelope. Keisha hesitated. Slide it under the door. He did. Then stepped back, rain soaking his jacket. Inside the envelope was a letter. Keisha unfolded it slowly. I thought hurting you made me strong. Made me nothing. Zuri's not using me anymore. I'm using her, to end this. Tonight. She doesn't know I kept proof of what she did inside the prison. Letters. Transfers. Hidden phones. If anything happens to me, they're in the locker under my name at Midtown Bus Station. Locker 24. Malik's eyes widened. He's turning on her. Keisha looked up, but Darius was gone. By the time Collins arrived, the storm had broken. Rain poured in sheets, thunder crashing like judgment itself. They drove straight to Midtown Bus Station. The locker was easy to find, number 24, dented and old. Inside was a small brown envelope labeled, The Real Fridays. Collins glanced at Keisha. You ready? Keisha nodded. I've been ready since the first one. They opened it. Inside were several prison letters, all written in Zuri's precise handwriting. Each one detailed bribes to guards, coded orders, and secret plans for expanding the Iron Palm. One letter ended chillingly. When I get out, I'll rebuild. Not with hate. With devotion. They'll worship me before they remember her. Collins exhaled sharply. This woman doesn't stop. Keisha's voice was calm. Then neither do I. That night, Collins filed the new evidence, securing Zuri's extended sentence. The news broke within hours. Notorious businesswoman Zuri Ogunlai found running prison crime ring, additional 15 years added. Across the city, women cheered. At the Palm Room, people danced until dawn. Keisha didn't celebrate loudly, she just sat by the window watching the rain fade into sunrise. Malik entered quietly. You could have been anywhere else by now. Why stay? Keisha smiled. Because the story isn't about how I was hurt. It's about what I built after. The next day, during a live broadcast for the shelter's fundraiser, Keisha addressed the world again. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means reclaiming your peace from the people who tried to steal it. If you're watching this right now and you've ever felt trapped, remember, your voice is the key. She paused, letting her words settle. Then she smiled warmly. So tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have forgiven or fought back harder? She leaned closer to the mic. Let's talk about it. Because silence only helps the abuser. Her audience responded in waves, comments flooding in from across the world. People thanking her, sharing stories, crying, healing. And for the first time in years, Keisha's Fridays weren't nights of pain. They were nights of power. Friday dawned with sunlight that felt different, lighter, almost golden. For the first time in years, Keisha didn't wake up with her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't fear the sound of footsteps, didn't brace for violence, didn't wait for survival. Instead, she woke to laughter from the courtyard below, children of survivors playing tag among potted flowers. Their voices filled the morning air like gospel. The Palm Room shelter had become a living thing now, a garden of second chances. But even in peace, scars have echoes. By mid-morning, Malik entered her office with a folder. The mayor called, he said, smiling. They want to honor you next month. The Atlanta Humanitarian of the Year. Keisha laughed softly. Me? The same woman who once thought surviving another Friday was her biggest achievement. Malik nodded. Exactly. That's why it matters. She smiled and shook her head. If it'll help more women get noticed, I'll accept it. As Malik turned to leave, her eyes caught a framed photo on the wall. Her and Darius from happier days before Zuri, before the bruises. She didn't take it down. She kept it there as a reminder that pain had a face, but so did forgiveness. Later that afternoon, Pastor Ruth and Andy Folake came by with a box of new donated items. Keisha, Ruth said, her voice tender, you're going to need security at that award event. People will come from everywhere. Security? Folake added, rolling her eyes. Let them try anything. I'll stand in front of her myself. Keisha chuckled. No need for armor anymore. We're surrounded by community now. But Pastor Ruth's smile was tinged with concern. Even healed wounds can itch when rain is coming, my dear. Stay cautious. Keisha nodded slowly. Always. That evening she received an unexpected visitor. Darius. He stood at the entrance of the Palm Room, wearing a simple black shirt, his face leaner, eyes sunken but steady. Malik nearly stopped him at the gate, but Keisha signaled to let him in. When Darius approached her office, his voice broke slightly. I didn't come to ask forgiveness, he said. I came to return what was left of me. He placed a folded envelope on her desk, a certificate of release, some cash, and a church pamphlet. I'm starting over, he continued. Pastor Ruth helped me join a rehab program for men who've hurt people. I'll never undo what I did, but maybe I can stop someone else before it's too late. Keisha looked up at him, not as a victim but as a woman who had survived. You can't rewrite the past, Darius. But you can refuse to repeat it. That's something. He nodded, voice low. You don't owe me peace, but thank you for showing me what it looks like. For the first time since everything began, she saw sincerity in his eyes. Not charm, not guilt, but remorse. It didn't erase anything, but it mattered. When he turned to leave, Keisha whispered, Goodbye, Darius. And this time, make it the last Friday you carry. He stopped briefly, nodded once, and walked out into the sunlight. That night, the city buzzed. News reports about Keisha's shelter, the award, the global campaign, #EveryFridayFree. The world had turned her pain into purpose. But in a quiet corner of Fulton State Prison, a different kind of energy simmered. Zuri sat in her cell, sketching plans across a notebook. She had lost everything, her businesses, her influence, her freedom, but not her conviction that the world owed her more. A guard approached. Mail for you. Zuri flipped open the envelope. Inside was a glossy event flyer. Atlanta Humanitarian Awards, honoring Keisha Carter, the Palm Room Shelter. She stared at the picture of Keisha smiling on stage. Her lips curved, not in anger but in something darker. "They'll cheer for her tonight," she whispered, "but I'll still be the one they talk about tomorrow." She reached for her pen and wrote one line under the photo. "The iron palm never dies." Then she folded the flyer carefully and slipped it into her Bible. The next evening, the award ceremony shimmered with elegance. The mayor, local journalists, church leaders, and women from across the state filled the auditorium. Keisha rolled up the ramp to thunderous applause, wearing a flowing emerald gown that glowed under the lights. Malik stood at the side of the stage, holding his camera, eyes shining with pride. Folake fanned herself dramatically, whispering, "Ah, see my daughter shining like Lagos traffic light." Keisha smiled as the host announced, "For her resilience, bravery, and transformation of tragedy into triumph, we honor Mrs. Keisha Carter." The crowd rose to their feet as she accepted the award, a golden palm leaf trophy. She took the microphone, pausing as silence fell. "Thank you," she began. "This isn't just my award. It belongs to every person who ever felt invisible. Every woman who survived another Friday night and chose to live." The audience murmured in approval. Cameras flashed. "When I was at my lowest," she continued, "I thought power belonged to those who hurt others. But now I know, true power belongs to those who heal." Applause swelled again, echoing through the hall. Then, just as she was about to end her speech, a phone buzzed on the podium. Her personal line. A known number. Instinct told her to ignore it. But something deeper, something old, told her to look. She glanced down at the screen. A text. "Nice speech. You wear the crown well. But remember, even a queen bleeds." See. Her fingers tightened around the trophy. Malik noticed from across the stage, concern flashing in his eyes. Keisha lifted her head, smiled faintly, and looked straight into the camera broadcasting live. "Before I end," she said, her voice steady, "I want to say one last thing, to anyone out there still living in fear of their abuser or of their past. Fear is loud, but truth is louder. Don't let them take another piece of your tomorrow." The crowd roared, clapping and shouting amen. The broadcast ended. But Keisha knew, Zuri had just declared a new kind of war. Not with whips. Not with words. With influence. Later that night, Keisha sat alone in her dressing room, the trophy gleaming on the table. She replayed the text in her mind. Malik entered quietly. "You saw it, didn't you?" "Yes," she whispered. "She's still watching." Malik clenched his fists. "She's locked up for 25 years now, Keisha. She can't touch you." Keisha looked at her reflection in the mirror. "She doesn't need to touch me. All she needs is someone willing to listen to her." She turned slowly. "And you know what's worse? Some people will." Malik frowned. "Then what do we do?" Keisha's eyes hardened with resolve. "We stay ready. We stay loud. And we keep building until her voice fades into background noise." She stood, lifted the trophy and whispered to herself, "This time she won't own the narrative. I do." Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, rhythmic, cleansing. Keisha stepped out into the drizzle, letting the cool water kiss her skin. Each drop felt like a baptism, a reminder that rebirth doesn't mean forgetting your scars. It means living with them proudly. And somewhere, far away behind iron bars, Zuri stared at the same rain through her cell window, whispering, "It's not over." But this time, Keisha's whisper carried louder through the night. "It is for me." The morning after the awards, the world felt brand new. Atlanta's skyline gleamed, and social media pulsed with love. Hashtag Keisha Carter trended globally, a symbol of hope. A survivor turned savior. At the Palm Room shelter, journalists crowded the gate, hoping for another interview. Survivors came bearing flowers. Strangers brought gifts. Keisha watched from her window, the golden palm trophy sitting quietly beside her Bible. She had won, legally, publicly, spiritually. But in her chest, a thin unease coiled like smoke. Zuri's text still echoed in her mind, "Even a queen bleeds." That afternoon, Malik burst into her office, tablet in hand. "You need to see this." He played a clip, a slick, edited video posted to a private social media page called the Iron Palm Movement. The video began with Zuri's voice. "They call her a hero. But heroes are just villains who won the argument." The visuals cut between clips of Keisha's speeches, her courtroom testimonies, and exaggerated graphics claiming she exaggerated her abuse for fame. Underneath, the caption read, "Truth is layered. Which side of Friday do you believe?" Within hours, it had already been shared thousands of times. Malik muttered, "She's starting a digital cult." Keisha exhaled. "No. She's trying to infect belief." Collins arrived minutes later, breathless from the rush. We've seen the video too. It's being coordinated by her followers inside and outside prison. We're working with cybercrime to trace it. Folake stormed in behind her, waving her phone. That woman's name should have expired by now. Is she not tired of disgrace? Pastor Ruth placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Evil rarely tires, my dear. That's why good must endure longer. Keisha nodded slowly. Then let's give her one last story she can't twist. That night, she called for a community broadcast from the Palm Room, streamed live across every platform. No studio lights. No makeup. Just Keisha, sitting before a crowd of women whose eyes carried the same history. The camera went live. Good evening, Keisha began, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. You've seen the lies. You've heard the noise. But I want you to hear something louder than both, the truth. She gestured behind her to the crowd. These women are not my followers. They are my sisters, my friends, my healers. The camera panned, dozens of women each holding a candle. Keisha continued, we don't build movements by tearing others down. We build them by lifting people up. I don't want to be famous for what hurt me, I want to be remembered for what I healed. Her tone softened. To the woman sitting in a dark room tonight, believing that no one will believe you, I see you. I was you. Silence. Then sniffles from the crowd. Keisha leaned closer to the camera. To Zuri, yes, I know you're watching. You said even queens bleed. You're right. But here's the difference, I bleed and still stand. I bleed and still build. You can't destroy what pain already purified. The crowd erupted into applause, tears glistening in every candlelight. 2 days later, the video reached millions. Major networks replayed it as a closing statement to one of the most powerful real-life redemption arcs in modern storytelling. Keisha Carter responds to hate with grace. From scars to strength, the voice that changed Fridays. Public sentiment shifted immediately. The Iron Palm pages were suspended. Zuri's network crumbled under exposure. Inside her prison cell, Zuri's smuggled phone buzzed non-stop with notifications. Account deactivated. Followers suspended. For the first time she felt what Keisha had once felt, silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't hide but ends things. She stared at the dull prison wall, whispering, she won again. And for the first time, tears escaped her eyes, not out of regret but realization. That her power was gone. Forever. Weeks passed. The shelter flourished. Grants poured in. Malik began developing a series of short documentaries titled Fridays Rewritten. Pastor Ruth's church partnered with them to create therapy centers across the state. Keisha no longer flinched at memories of Darius. She heard his name now and thought of lessons, not pain. Every Friday night, she gathered the shelter residents in a circle. They prayed, laughed, sometimes cried. But they always ended the same way, singing together. The same hymn she once heard faintly through her apartment window. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. And as their voices filled the Palm Room, Keisha would close her eyes, letting the words soak her soul. She was still. But never silent. One particular Friday evening, a year to the day since the first video went live, the mayor returned to cut the ribbon for the Palm Foundation headquarters. Reporters asked Keisha what kept her going despite everything. She smiled gently, answering, because every time I tell my story, another woman writes hers. And when we all speak, silence has nowhere left to hide. That night, she walked out to the courtyard alone. The city lights danced against the windows, the air cool and calm. Malik joined her quietly. It's strange, he said, how something that started with so much pain could end this beautiful. Keisha looked up at the stars. That's what light does, it enters through cracks. He nodded, smiling. You know, you could write a book. Call it, The Fridays That Made Me. Keisha chuckled softly. Maybe I already am, just not with pages. He raised a brow. Then with what? With people, she said simply. Every woman who walks in here is another chapter. As the clock struck 9, the hour that once filled her with terror, Keisha whispered a quiet prayer. God, thank you for turning the nights that used to break me into nights that build others. She turned her face toward the window and her reflection smiled back, peaceful, powerful, whole. Outside, lightning flickered across the distant horizon, not as a threat, but as a reminder of how far storms can travel before they fade. Keisha exhaled deeply. The story had come full circle. From victim to victor. From silence to song. And as the candles of the Palm Room flickered through the night, one truth stood eternal. Every Friday that once brought pain, now birthed purpose.